Kachi, Kachi. Hey, hey, you don't hear? Oh. I have been warning you times without number. Leave this thing for men. It is not your job. Leave it for them. You say it all the time. Why can't I have both? Hello, people. Welcome to another interesting story segment on African Thoughts channel. If you're just joining us for the first time, please watch our videos, like, subscribe, and leave a comment because your feedback is very important to us. Now, let's dive into today's story. Story. Once upon a time. The title of today's story is Equal Grounds. In the village of Umunzi, a place steeped in tradition, the roles of men and women were clearly defined. Men were warriors, hunters, and decision makers, while women were caregivers, farmers, and homemakers. This had been the way for generations, and no one thought to question it until Kachi was born. Kachi was a girl, the firstborn of her family, but from a young age she showed talents and interests that were unusual for a girl in Umunzi. While other girls spent their time learning to farm and cook, Kachi was more fascinated by the village council meetings where the men discussed important matters. She would sneak into the shadows to listen as they debated land disputes, trade routes, and strategies to protect the village. Her father, Ekene, a respected warrior, noticed this and tried to steer her back to the expected path. Kachi, you're a girl, he would say gently. One day, you will marry and take care of your own household. Leave these things for men now. Eh? Leave these things to men. But Kachi was stubborn. Why can't I have both? She asked. I can learn to take care of a home, but I also want to learn to make decisions and protect our village, just like the men. Her father would smile and shake his head, thinking it was just a phase that would pass. But years passed, and Umunzi faced growing challenges. A neighboring village, seeking more land and resources, began raiding Umunzi's farmlands. The attack were swift, and the council struggled to come up with a solution. Every plan they devised seemed to fail. The men were frustrated, and the village was on the brink of collapse. One night, Kachi overheard the council arguing over what to do. She knew they were missing something, but as a girl, she had no right to speak at these meetings, so she came up with a plan. The next day, she went to her father and laid out all her ideas. Instead of fighting head-on, she used the land's natural defenses, river banks, dense forests, and hills to create traps and ambushes. She had studied the terrain and knew how the enemies approached. Ekene listened carefully. For the first time, seeing his daughter not as a disobedient girl, but as someone with genuine insight. He brought her plan to the council, but when they realized the idea came from Kachi, they dismissed it outright. No girl can understand the ways of war, the head of the council scoffed. She should be preparing to marry, not meddling in men's affairs. But the attack continued, and the situation grew more desperate. Finally, Ekene, against the wishes of the council, took a few warriors and implemented Kachi's plan. They set up the traps and prepared their ambushes in secret. When the raiders attacked again, they were caught completely off guard. The traps slowed them down and the ambushes scattered their forces. It was a decisive victory for Umunzi, and the invaders never returned because they couldn't tell what to expect next. Word quickly spread about how Ekene's small group had turned the tide of the conflict, and soon the truth emerged. That strategy had been Kachi's, Ekene said. The villagers were stunned. Some men angry, feeling embarrassed that a young girl had succeeded where they had failed. But others began to see that perhaps the village had been wrong to silence her, and that Umunzi had been weakened by ignoring the voices of its women. Slowly, attitudes began to shift. Kachi's courage in challenging norm sparked a conversation that had never been had before. The village started to recognize that wisdom, strength, and leadership weren't confined to gender. The women of Umunzi, who had always worked hard behind the scenes, now began to take part in decisions that affected the community. The council, for the first time in its history, invited women to join their meetings, not as listeners, but as equals. Kachi was among the first women to be included, and with her insights, Umunzi thrived in ways it never had before. This new balance brought unexpected benefits. The women's perspectives introduced new ideas for trade, agriculture, and even diplomacy, which had been overlooked before. The men, who had always carried the burden of protection and leadership alone, found that sharing responsibilities lightened the load. The village became more unified, resilient, and prosperous. In time, the story of Umeze's transformation spread to other villagers in different villages, inspiring them to rethink their own traditions. The lesson was clear: a community that only listens to half of its people will never reach its full potential. Gender was not a limitation, it was strength, and the future was brighter when men and women stood together as equals. Kachi's bravery had built a bridge where there had once been a wall. The power of equality, once ignored, now became the foundation of Umuzi's progress. And in the end, the village learned that true strength comes not from division, but from unity, when everyone, regardless of gender, has the chance to contribute their gift to the greater good. The end of this story. I hope you learned something today, because I learned a lot about gender equality, sharing responsibility, and living in unity can affect a community's growth in the long run. Please tell us what you learned in the comment section.
Thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on your notification button to stay updated on the juiciest African tales. From me, see you in the next one. Bye.